After controversially losing to Poatan, Adesanya entered one of the best phases of his kickboxing career, winning his next 7 fights in a row, until on January 20, 2017, he would fight for the Glory Belt, the kickboxing's biggest event in the world. His opponent would be the Dutch, Jason Wilnies, who was the first fighter to defeat and knock out Alex Pereira. In the fight between Adesanya and Wilnies for the Glory middleweight belt, the Nigerian fighter lost by unanimous decision. After failing to become champion in the biggest kickboxing event in the world, he was planning to switch entirely to MMA. At that time he already had 9 fights in professional MMA, and won all of them by knockout. He used to alternate between MMA and kickboxing. During most of his career he always gave more priority to kickboxing, but he wanted to make one of his dreams come true, which was to fight in the UFC, the biggest fighting event in the world. However, before going to MMA permanently he still had one more commitment in kickboxing world, which was a fight against Poatan in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Before the rematch between Israel and Alex in Brazil, Pereira was coming off a knockout defeat in his last fight against the Ukrainian, Artur Kishenko. At that moment both fighters were coming off a defeat. The first round started with both fighters low-kicking each other. They both had good moments in the first round. In the second round the Nigerian was much better and almost got the knockout, but the Brazilian was saved by the count. At the beginning of the third round, Izzy, with a lot of confidence after dominating the previous round, started the third round with a flying knee. And a few seconds later he was brutally knocked out by Poatan. That was the first time he got knocked out in his career. This knockout was so bad that he needed an oxygen mask to recover. This defeat was catastrophic for Izzy, as it would be his last fight in the sport of kickboxing. Also that was very frustrating, since he was dominating the fight and ended up suffering one of the most brutal knockouts of the decade. That knockout would be very important for Alex's entry into the UFC, as this KO would serve as a passport for him to enter and be fast-tracked in the UFC. After that, they went their separate ways. Izzy arrived in the UFC in 2018 as one of the biggest prospects. With his charisma, he was slowly becoming one of the biggest stars in MMA. Israel made his UFC debut in February 2018, winning by knockout in the second round and getting the Performance of the Night award. In his second fight in the biggest MMA event in the world, he defeated Marvin Vettori by split decision. In his third fight he defeated Brad Tavares by unanimous decision. In November of that same year, he would have his fourth fight of the year. His opponent was the gatekeeper of the division, Derek Brunson, in a fight where Adesanya made Brunson look like an amateur, and knocked out the American wrestler in the first round. After this incredible performance, many saw him as a future middleweight champion, since in his first year in the UFC he had 4 fights and won them all. While Pereira, 7 months after his victory over Adesanya, he would fight for the Glory Belt against Canadian Simon Marcus. The fight took place on October 14, 2017, in China. Poatan won by unanimous decision and etched his name in the history of kickboxing by becoming the champion of the biggest kickboxing event in the world. 2 months after becoming champion, he would defend his belt for the first time against the Dutch, Yusri Belgaraoui. Belgaraoui had already defeated Pereira a few months before by decision. This fight would be the rematch between them. In the rematch, Pereira knocked out Belgaraoui in the third round. Alex was consolidating himself as a dominant champion, having defended Glory's middleweight belt 5 times in a row. Pereira saw that with each asedanha victory, the Nigerian's popularity rose a lot. On some occasions Alex posted an image of asedanha knocked out as a way of promoting himself. However, Izzy continued to ignore the Brazilian and didn't even mention Pereira's name.
Wrong. You had a kickboxing fight. Was it in Glory?
Yeah, no, that was the one with in Brazil.
In Brazil,
with what's
yeah.
his name? Alex. Yeah.
Alex
that
Pereira,
one, yeah,
right?
Pereira, yeah.
Yeah. Where you lost and you were talking about what it was like to get knocked out.
Yeah, for me, that's everyone's worst fear. So that for me was 2 firsts for the first time.
Like you were real open about it on Instagram. And
because that's the fear. Like every fighter, like if it was just me and a guy fighting and I lost, it's like, oh, whatever. But when you put it in front of, millions of people, that's the fear. It's like, oh shit, I don't want to look like shit in front of all these people.
What did you get hit with?
I was southpaw, was a left hook from him.
Interestingly, 2019 was a super important year for both of them. Izzy that year became UFC champion, while Poatan became the first double champion in the Glory kickboxing history.